Disease. Health is defined as being free from communicable and non-communicable disease. So a communicable disease is usually caused by microorganisms such as a bacteria, virus or fungus and can be passed from one organism to another. You need to be aware of examples of each type. So bacteria, Salmonella, is a disease that is spread through contaminated food. To prevent it, cook food thoroughly, and to treat it, you use antibiotics. Tuberculosis is spread through the air and is treated with antibiotics. And chlamydia is a sexual contact disease. Prevent it by using a condom and again treat it using antibiotics. So antibiotics are used to treat bacterial infections. Viruses such as HIV that leads to AIDS is spread through the exchange of bodily fluids or sharing needles. It is controlled by using drugs. The cold and flu virus is spread through the air and can be prevented using a flu vaccine. And the HPV virus is spread through sexual contact and again can be prevented using HPV vaccine. Fungus, athlete's foot, is spread through contact. To prevent it, avoid direct contact, for example wearing flip-flops in changing rooms of swimming pools, and to treat it, use antifungal treatment. Potato blight is another airborne fungal disease that affects plants. Our body has many defence mechanisms to prevent the entry of microorganisms. So for example, the skin prevents the entry of pathogens. Sticky mucus lines the mucous membranes and respiratory systems to trap in pathogens. And blood clots will seal the wounds, preventing the entry of pathogens and stop the blood escaping. And we had looked at that in the circulatory booklet of the conversion of the fibrinogen to fibrin and the role of the platelets. Our white blood cells, the lymphocytes and the phagocytes, they play an important role in our immune system. So how they play their role: microorganisms that have invaded the body have antigens on their surface that the human body will recognise as being foreign or non-self. This causes the white blood cells, the lymphocytes, to produce antibodies which are complementary to the shape of the antigen. And it's important to say the word complementary to the shape of the antigen. And the antigen is found on the outer surface of the membrane of the pathogen. An antibody will only work on one type of microorganism because of this complementary nature. This is a specific type of immune response, as the antibodies produced will only fit one type of antigen on a pathogen. The antibodies will immobilise the microorganisms by clumping them together, and the clump of the microorganisms is then destroyed by phagocytosis. Here, the second white blood cell, the phagocytes, engulf the microorganisms and then break them down, making them harmless using enzymes. So know the role of the lymphocytes in their production of antibodies that are specific to one particular type of antigen, complementary shape to the antigen, and then the phagocytes, their role in phagocytosis to engulf the microorganisms and break them down using enzymes. Immunity, so there's two types that we're going to look at: active and passive. Active immunity comes about when your body has produced the antibodies themselves, so the lymphocytes has produced the antibodies, or a vaccine has been given. So in the first exposure, this is known as the primary response. You can see in the graph the number of antibodies increases, and then the second exposure, there's a rapid increase in the secondary response, and a higher level of antibodies can be seen in the blood there, and the levels of antibodies decrease much slower than in the primary response. A vaccine is a dead or modified form of a disease-causing microorganism. It will have the antigens present that will trigger the lymphocytes to produce the antibodies and bring about this same response. It is slower acting, so it takes a little bit of time. So if a person is exposed to the pathogen, they may suffer from the symptoms. If you have the vaccine, again, you may have a few of the symptoms, but it will not be as severe as being exposed to the pathogen itself. Sometimes you're also given a booster, which would be the second exposure to the antigen. This would be a booster vaccine, and it would have the same response as the secondary response. Much quicker and a higher level of antibodies in the blood, and it will reach a threshold level that will give the person immunity. Passive immunity is when the antibodies are obtained from another source. So for example, being injected into the body. The level goes up very quickly. It is fast acting, but it will only last for a short period of time, And that is because your body, the lymphocytes in the body, have not produced those antibodies. They have been injected. So there are no memory lymphocytes remaining. Therefore, the body cannot respond in that secondary response. Antibiotics are chemicals produced by fungi that are used to kill bacteria. They will not treat viruses, as viruses live inside the body cells, so would have to damage the cell to get the virus. So they are only used to kill bacteria. Antibiotic resistance can arise. This is when the bacteria mutate. Some of those mutations, remember it's a random mutation, allow the bacteria to survive or to be resistant to the antibiotic. They then will not be killed by the antibiotics, so they can multiply, and their numbers of the resistant bacteria then increase. And that's what the diagram's trying to show you there. Overuse of antibiotics has been a major factor in the development of bacterial resistance. So, for example, MRSA is a type of bacterial resistance to most antibiotics and is a problem in hospital. Or superbugs is another name that can be given to these bacteria resistance. So to reduce the incidence of superbugs, do not overuse antibiotics if they're not needed, so do not take them for a viral infection. Increase hygiene in hospitals. Isolate patients if they're identified as having a superbug or MRSA. Non-communicable diseases are not passed from person to person. So they can arise due to either genetics, having genes that will predispose or make you more at risk to developing a condition, and also lifestyle factors such as poor diet, lack of exercise, or overexposure to sun. Or it could be a mixture of both. Obesity is linked to heart disease and type 2 diabetes. Misuse of drug is a lifestyle factor. So, for example, alcohol, binge drinking is drinking too much alcohol on one occasion. Too much alcohol can, and you need to know these, damage the liver or affect fetal development during pregnancy, which is known as fetal alcohol syndrome. Tobacco smoke can damage the health, so know that tar can cause bronchitis, emphysema, or lung cancer. That nicotine is the addictive drug that's found in cigarettes and affects the heart rate. And carbon monoxide combines with hemoglobin in the red blood cells, so reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. Cancer is uncontrolled cell division. There are two types of cancer tumours: benign, which is shown in the diagram there. They do not spread around the body and are often found in a capsule or said to be encapsulated. Malignant tumour, these can spread around the body, as you can see there, as they are not encapsulated. And you can sometimes get asked to look at diagrams like this and explain the differences between the cancer cells and the normal cells. So look at the size of the cell and the size of the nucleus and the shape of the cell also. Lifestyle choices can increase the risk of developing cancers. So for example, UV radiation can cause skin cancer. So protect yourself by covering up, wear sunscreen and avoid the midday sun. Cigarette smoke, the tar will increase the risk of lung cancer, and viruses like the HPV virus is linked to cervical cancer, so to protect yourself, get the HPV vaccine. There are economic costs to the NHS for both communicable and non-communicable diseases. So many need long-term treatment, so for example heart disease or cancers. They may involve long stays in the hospital. Expensive drugs and medicines may be required, and trained staff would be required. It also can have an impact on families, carers, and people needing time off work. So there could be a financial implication as well. So let's look at some questions. So complete the table which gives information on some diseases caused by microorganisms. So you need to complete the table, so take a moment to look at it. You can pause and see if you can answer it. So AIDS is caused by a virus, spread by the exchange of infected bodily fluids. So to prevent, use a condom or abstinence or fewer partners, don't share needles, don't use dirty needles or use sterilised needles are possible answers you could give there as ways of preventing it. What disease is caused by a fungus and is caused by direct contact, often in the swimming pool changing rooms, and you wear flip-flops? That would be athlete's foot. Salmonella is a disease spread by contaminated food. It is caused by bacteria. And measles is a virus spread through the air. So airborne droplet infection in the air, breathing in, airborne, sneezing or coughing were all answers. The body has a number of natural defence systems. They help prevent us from getting disease caused by microorganisms. Complete the table by suggesting how each of the following defence mechanisms help to prevent disease. So blood clotting, mucous membranes and production of phagocytes. And you can see production of phagocytes is worth 2 marks, so you need 2 points for that. Blood clotting helps to prevent disease by preventing microorganisms from entering a cut. So not talking about blood loss, you're thinking about how it prevents a disease. Mucous membranes will trap microbes, or the microbes will stick to the mucus or in the mucus, or the mucus will catch the microbes. So to get the 2 marks for the production of phagocytes, they will engulf or surround the pathogen and then digest it or break down the microorganisms. One type of white blood cell produces antibodies to fight disease caused by some microorganisms. The diagram shows the effect of antibodies on some microorganisms. Use the diagram to describe how the antibodies help the body defend against microorganism A. So that's the first part. And then explain why these antibodies have no effect on microorganism B. So looking at the first part, how does it help defend against A? So you want to be talking about the shape of the antibody being complementary to the antigen shape. And if we look at microorganism B, we can see that the antigen shape is not going to fit in with the antibodies or is not complementary. So the antibodies attach to the antigen because the antibodies are specific or fit or match or complementary to A, cause the bacteria to clump together, prevents the microorganisms from dividing, reproducing, or easier for phagocytosis to occur or move around the body or immobilizes them. The antibodies do not match or fit or are specific to or are complementary to the antigens that are found on B. So any 4 of those would get you 4 marks. The World Health Organization has published some facts about sexually transmitted infections. They are listed below. So worldwide, more than 1 million people get a sexually transmitted infection every day. The majority of people with STIs have no symptoms. STIs such as gonorrhea and chlamydia are major causes of infertility. A person has been infected with an STI. Use only the facts listed above to suggest why this person may not go to a doctor to be diagnosed with the STI. So from the information given, they may not go because the STI has no symptoms. So they don't know they have the sexually transmitted infection. Another person has the symptoms of STI. Suggest why this person may not go to the doctor to be treated for the STI. So they may not go because they're embarrassed or they're in denial or their parents might find out or they don't know what the symptoms indicate. A person infected with an STI can pass the STI on to other people. Complete the diagram to show the sequence of infection if each infected person has 2 sexual partners. So each infected person infects 2 others. So to complete this, you would need to complete the second row, showing that person had infected another person. And then each of the ones below are each infecting 2 people. So you would have, at the end of that, 2, 4, 6, 8 people infected. The first person passes on an STI. Use the diagram to state how many more people will be infected with the STI. So that was that diagram completed. Polio is a disease caused by a virus. Since 1988, the WHO has a vaccination programme aimed at wiping out polio worldwide. In 1988, the number of people with polio worldwide was 350,000. In 2014, the number of people with polio worldwide was 386. Calculate the percentage reduction in the number of people with polio from 1988 to 2014. And your answer is in 2 decimal places. So it has gone from 350,000 to 386. So that is a decrease of 34,900 34,961,4. So you put the difference over the original and multiply by 100%, and that gives you 98.89% reduction. Afghanistan, Nigeria and Pakistan are 3 countries that still have people with polio. In these countries, polio vaccine is given by drops into the mouth. The vaccine is given on 3 separate occasions. Suggest one advantage of using a vaccine that can be given by drops into the mouth rather than by injection. So the main reason would be that you don't need trained personnel, or there's no fear of needles or infected needles. The graph shows the number of people with polio in Afghanistan, Nigeria and Pakistan between 2010 and 2014. So this is reading a graph in which 1 year period is a trend in all 3 countries the same. So we can see that between 2010 and 2011, they all are increasing. Use the graph to give the difference in the trend for Nigeria and Pakistan between 2012 and 2014. So the trend is that Nigeria is decreasing and that Pakistan is increasing. Assume that the trend in numbers of people with polio in Pakistan continued at the same rate as in 2013 to 2014. Draw a line in the graph to give the number of people with polio in Pakistan in 2015. So you would continue the line on, and then you would read off from your graph what the reading would be. So in this, it would be around 470, but they would allow a range. Tuberculosis is a bacterial disease that can be spread from person to person by airborne droplets, like coughing. Describe how a person's immune system responds to infection by TB bacteria, for 4 marks. So for this, you want to think about how the white blood cells play their job. So any 4 of these. So the antigen on the bacterium is detected as being non-self or foreign. This will trigger the lymphocytes, or the white blood cells, to produce antibodies that are complementary to the shape of the antigen on the bacterium. An alternative answer would be that memory cells produce antibodies that lock into the bacterium or join with the antigen. But the antigens and the antibodies connecting causes clumping, immobilization, stops reproduction, stops them spreading, allows phagocytosis, or the phagocytes, to engulf and digest them. So the key thing would be that the antigens on the bacterium trigger the lymphocytes to produce antibodies that are complementary to the antigen on the bacterium. This causes the bacterium to clump together and allows phagocytosis to occur, where the phagocytes engulf and digest them. The information in the box gives an example of how one infected person can result in a large number of infected people in a population after 3 years. So one infected person infects 10 other people during year 1. Each newly infected person from year 1 then infects 10 other people during year 2. Each newly infected person in year 2 infects 10 other people during year 3. So you're being asked to calculate the total number of people with TB in this population after 3 years. So we have one person at the beginning infecting 10. Then those 10 each infect 10. So we have 100 people in year 2 infected. And then those 100 people infect 10 people each. So that gives us 1,000 infected. So the total is the one person at the beginning, plus 10 in year 1, plus 100 in year 2, plus 1,000 in year 3. And that gives us 1111. Name the type of chemical used to treat bacterial diseases such as TB. That would be an antibiotic. And name the type of organism that produces this type of chemical. That is a fungus. In 2016, there were 10.4 million new cases of TB worldwide. In 600,000 of these cases, the bacteria were resistant to the type of chemical used to treat TB. Calculate the percentage of the new cases of TB where the bacteria were resistant, and again, give your answer to 2 decimal places. So you want to work out 600,000 of 10.4 million multiplied by 100%, and that gives 5.77, and then multiplying by 100 gives you 57.69, or they allowed 0.58 as well for 1 mark. So sorry, the answer is 5.77. If you had just written down 57.69, you'd get 1 mark, or 0.58, you'd get 1 mark. So 600,000 divided by 10.4 million times 100 gives you 5.77. Suggest why bacterial resistance has increased over the 20 years. The overuse of antibiotics, mutations, mutated bacteria have reproduced. The body has a number of defence mechanisms against disease-causing microorganisms. One of these mechanisms is a clumping of microorganisms. The diagram shows a clump of 3 microorganisms. On the diagram, label an antigen. So we know the antigen is found on the outside, so any of those. Describe the stages that have occurred to produce this clump. So what happened? So this is where you're talking about your lymphocytes. The antigen's been recognised as foreign. The lymphocytes producing antibodies or specific presence of antibodies, and that the antibodies attach to the antigen or have a complementary shape to the antigen. Microorganisms in a clump cannot easily move. Suggest how this helps in the defence against disease. So you could say there that it stops them spreading, stops them reproducing, or makes it easier for phagocytosis to occur. After the clump has been formed, it is then destroyed by another process. Name and describe this process. So the process is phagocytosis, and they engulf and then digest or destroy using enzymes.